Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to develop enough self-awareness to recognize the difference between your thought that's imagination and your thought that's intuition. And there's a difference when you develop the skills of awareness. There's a difference in feel. When I imagine something, I'm putting my will to it to create it. And when intuition is working, I'm holding my will still, which is the whole point of meditation, to practice that. And by holding my will still in my area of thought and letting thoughts come up, then all I have to do is put the question that I want answered out in my mind and wait until it gets filled. It's like watching the surface of a pool of water, and the subconscious is below in the water, and the mind is above it. And if you can hold yourself still enough, you watch as the idea emerges from the surface. It has a different, more substantial feel to it, because it's more real, because it's completely vetted by the subconscious mind and all the processes that go on below the conscious mind. And when it's offered, you're there with your conscious mind to be able to accept it in and to work with it and play with it. When I was a formulation chemist, I would work with the analytical mind to develop the questions, to answer all the questions that I could with my analytical mind. And then I would take what I couldn't understand or didn't have an answer for, and I would flip it over to my intuitive mind, and I would go take my nap, or I would go for a walk, or I would just set it in the back of my mind and let it sit there until it brought forward an answer. And the moment that I had an answer pop up into my mind to a question that I was holding open, I would recognize that it was the answer or an answer to my open question, and I would draw it in and work with it, flip it back over to the analytical mind and see if it worked the way it needed to. And you flip, when you work with it, you learn to be aware of what's there, and by being aware, developing the practice of being aware, then over time you wind up being able to flip back and forth at will. And when you're that in charge of your intuition, it's a mighty tool. It's huge.
Yes, I know. I read photographs and I do a lot of things in the manner in which you spoke. I wouldn't have been able to express it that way. It was expressed brilliantly. But I will tell you that I think that one of the answers I would give is that you know that you know that you know. Because there is a feeling inside of you. There's sometimes one knowing creates a more extended view of your creativity in your intuition, and lo and behold, you know, it starts languaging itself in the most creative ways. And again, you know that you know.
Right.
Can I give you an example of something like that?
Sure.
Of course, you know, there's nothing been normal in my life in this area since I've been born, but thank God it was something that got grounded by the time I was in my mid-30s. And I had, this is a true story, I had a, back in the 70s, there was a rapist who was, and there were three of them, and they were riding around in a van, and I won't go into all the details, but one afternoon I was home and married, had 4 kids, and there's a knock at my door, and I looked through the peephole, and I was living in Newport Beach. I was up on this little bluff in a sort of like a house condo, and I looked out the door, peephole, and there was these 2 people, and one was up against the door, and one was standing in front of me, and they had done an artist sketch of the main person who was doing the raping. And I froze, and I heard inside my head, breathe. Just breathe and don't open the door. So then I felt like angels were watching over me, and I got away from the door, and my heart started pounding because I realized that I was in serious danger. And I got her into the kitchen, and I was able to call the police, and they kept me on the phone. And then the van that was in front of the house that could kind of see through my kitchen sheer saw that I was on the phone. And they ran down the walk, jumped inside their car, a van, and left rubber getting away from the front of my house. And within minutes was a helicopter, okay? So the difference between maybe, and maybe I'm bringing this up for a reason, there's the intuitive knowing, gut feeling I'm in danger, and then there's this other thing that happens to us in life that you could say, well, this was completely outside of me. I had both in that experience. And I think there's more people out there in the world that would, if they really started looking at some of the things that have happened in their life, they would say, yes, I think I had some angelic intervention, and yes, I had a deep, intuitive, gut-knowing feeling, and it guided me. It's like not getting on a plane. Maybe something's delayed the plane, and you've got a layover, and then the next day, you go back to the airport, and from the moment you walk into that airport, magical things are happening. You end up in first class drinking champagne. This experience. And I was really upset the night before. I wasn't exactly friendly to the person behind the counter who told me I was going to not be able to get on the flight and have to spend the night because of fog. So, I mean, it's like life teaches you some pretty amazing lessons when you're able to stop. And, you know, I didn't get it until I actually was sitting in first class drinking champagne and having all this attention. And you know what I did to get the attention? Well, it wasn't to get the attention. I went into gratitude. And I went up to the man and that had been behind the counter, and I said, I was just so rude to you the night before. And I said, this is what was going on in my life. And he said, well, I can understand why you were really upset. I said, no, I had no right to transfer this on to you. You're just doing the job. And I said, you don't have an easy job. I said, you have to deal with people day in and day out. And I said, I just thank you for not getting really overly upset with me. And he said, you know what, you just stay right here. And he said, you sit down and stay right here. And he went onto the plane and arranged a bunch of things for me just because I said, I'm sorry. So I think the intuitiveness, and I didn't know I was going to do that when I walked into the airport until I saw him. See how, I mean, I call it God works in mysterious ways, but the surprise of life, when you can really be trusting yourself authentically, is absolutely such a gift to have in our arsenal. To walk through this life. It's the difference between going and jumping off a cliff or maybe taking the mountain path that takes a little longer and going along the side.
One
takes longer.
One has a little better ending.
One has a better ending. Yeah, I would say so. I would be the guy that jumps out of the airplane. We get the parachute caught on the back end of the rudder and have to clip my strings so I'd have the backup parachute, you know, I mean. And then people, I would land perfectly and they'd walk up to me and say, Badeish, you made a perfect landing, but yeah, I almost died. That's happened to people, actually. Okay. How does someone recognize, oh, we did that one. Okay. How does a practical executive build intuition skills?
Oh, this is the fun part. First off, I want to go back a little bit. I want to read the definition that I have here of intuition.